You're listening to Sports Connections with David Smale, the show that brings you a fun and intimate look into connections throughout sports. Now here's your host, David Smale.
Don Smale has been a fan of and participant in the sport of bowling for as long as he can remember. He bowled collegiately at UNLV in the late 1980s, and his son just finished his career as a collegiate bowler. He's covered the sport for years, and he's been a voter in the collegebowling.com media poll for the past 6 years. Before you give him too much credit, though, we do have to wonder about his common sense. He's a Las Vegas Raiders fan, but he will bend your ear on the greatness of the sport, once the most popular participation sport in America. And yes, before you ask, Don is my cousin. My dad was the 9th of 11 kids, and his dad was 11th. And I think his dad was the one that walked around the neighborhood asking if he was adopted. I'm not sure. He's a faithful listener to the podcast and actually a pretty good dude for a Raiders fan. Don, welcome to Sports Connections.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's I'm still wondering, me? Really?
Well, I can tell you through some exhaustive research that you are the first bowling expert that we have had on the podcast. Now, there may be some people that we've had on who like to bowl. You know, that you gave me a statistic that 1.70 million people bowl, fairly regularly, at least once a week. And if there's 280 million people, that's 1 out of 4. Well, I've had 40 some guests. So I'm guessing some of those are bowlers. You're the first expert, and we want to be, we want to be the wide world of sports of podcast. You know, the constant variety of sports. We're not going to make you fall down a hill off a ski jump, but we want to have some variety with that. So I'm glad you're with us. It's good to catch up with you.
Yeah, I'm grateful and thankful for being here. You better believe it.
Well, let's just start with how you got involved in bowling. And I know this story, obviously, we're cousins, but tell our viewers and our listeners how you got involved in bowling.
Well, times have changed, certainly, but when you're a child of the late 60s and it's late 60s, early 70s, and mom and dad or grandpa, grandma, aunt, uncle, or whatever, they were involved in activities such as bowling. You typically didn't have much of a choice.
Yeah.
Their involvement meant you were involved. And luckily for my brother and I, we tagged along and we had a great time watching the sport and enjoying the sport as it was, as a spectator. You learn a lot from observation in life in general and also in sports. And so, you learn sort of what not to do and what to do inside the sport, even from people that have a very casual, a casual relationship to the sport. I remember very early on, friends of my mom and dad's from the Elks Lodge, for instance, or from bowling leagues and such. My brother and I are very little, and that was a fun thing to run back and ask which one of us, hey, what pins were those that were left, and why was that left, and then, we would give our little theories, whether they were right or wrong. It was sort of cute to for them to come back and we'd tell them what they were doing right or wrong, whether we knew what we were talking about or not. And, and that's where it started. And, my first league as a kid was 1975, 1976. So it's a little ways ago, right?
Yeah.
And it's evolved over time. I went from a youth competitor to high school bowler. Here in Nevada, bowling is a varsity sport. It's kind of weird. Southern Nevada has bowling as a varsity sport. Northern Nevada has snow skiing as a varsity sport, winter sports. From there, I bowled at UNLV. My dream growing up was always to be a professional bowler. We always watched the PBA Tour on Saturdays. It was one of those things. But I had this disease that I found out later on called big fish, little pond-itis.
That's the technical term for it, huh?
Exactly. So when I thought about possibly becoming a professional, it was pretty obvious and pretty early on that I ran out of talent compared to a lot of those guys. I was sort of a one-trick pony, and they were really versatile and really good, and they could do a lot of things that I could only dream of. And so it was probably time to move on from that dream. And luckily I bowled league and bowled a few things, along the way. I bowled the Masters as an amateur, when the entrance requirements weren't quite as stringent as they are now. Went away from the game for a while, got back into the game, after some family obligations. It kind of changed a little bit. And then our youngest son would follow us to the bowling center. And then, it's just an evolutionary process. Now he's following in my steps, and then he decides he wants to bowl. So now I go from youth bowler to bowler on different levels to now coaching. I've got to help him and mentor, and then so on and so forth. And that's how it got started. And I'm still in there. The roles change, but
yeah,
I went from that competitor side, which I enjoyed, but I just wasn't as good at it. And now I'm in like the service side, and I like that mainly because I feel like the game gave me a lot. And so now it's time to give back.
You said you weren't very good, but it's like somebody who can, I cover the big three sports pretty regularly: football, basketball, and baseball. Somebody says, well, I'm not a very good golfer, maybe, or not a very good baseball player. I went to the Louisville Slugger Museum in Louisville when my daughter lived down there. And they've got a little area where you can see a 98-mile-an-hour fastball coming towards you. And it's all done with machines, but they've got a video of a pitcher, and he's in his windup, and as he lets it go, boom, here it comes. And I say you can see it, you actually hear it more than see it. And I'm thinking, I'm not a very good, I was never a good athlete. I was okay, but I was not a good athlete. The difference between me and somebody who's just not quite good enough to make it on the, in Major League Baseball, not quite good enough to make it on the PGA Tour, stuff like that, is so great. So I think your perspective is off a little bit, Don, because you were good enough to bowl collegiately. You're good enough to compete collegiately. You've competed in some of these events, maybe as an amateur, but you're still one of the, probably the best bowler I've ever known. I don't remember how good your dad was. My dad was pretty good, but he had a 180 average, but you're still pretty good. How much better, or what would it have taken for you to be professional level? What was the difference?
That's a good question. Well, to be honest, I had some pretty high expectations, and I didn't have probably the work ethic at that time that I needed. And as I said, a lot of the guys that were way better than I was, and they were successful at that level where I wanted to be later on, much more versatile. They certainly had a better temperament than I had, because at that time, when things didn't go the way I wanted, you knew. My dad used to always say he could tell how I bowled depending on how I came through the front door. So if I had bowled well, I was going to be in a happy mood, and the bowling equipment got set down nice and gentle, and I wanted to tell him what a great day I had. And if not, the bowling balls came through the door before I did. And so, so I probably, having the mental, probably the right mental perspective, not getting in your own way, kind of a thing. That's one of the things where the game has changed so much. Back then, they're athletes back then, but nothing like now. These guys are gym rats now. They're all nutrition. They're all sports psychology. They start before college. They get to college, and the programs are so great at building the student athlete from every angle. Yeah. And I think about what I was trying to do versus what they do now, even at 14, 15, 16 years old. It's just night and day. And I don't know. Part of me, I guess, probably wishes that, you know, I was of age now where I could take advantage of all the technology and all those sort of things. But hey, it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah. Well, and when you talk about physical nutrition, I wish I had a t-shirt that says this, but my motto is Body by Krispy Kreme. That doesn't exactly lend itself to becoming a professional athlete. There's so much nutrition involved in every single sport, including bowling. I want to ask you, you obviously were pretty good, even if you want to knock yourself down a little bit. How many 300 games have you rolled?
I ended up with 4 300s. I actually had 2 800 series. Through the years, I had one without a 300 game and one with a 300 game. 800 series for 3 games.
Yeah.
It's just a much more difficult a feat, I guess.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. Again, the game has changed. If you follow bowling, you had Spencer Robarge on television just recently in the PBA juniors, and then he was part of one of the PBA telecasts here just recently. He's 18 years old and already had 41 300 games.
Oh goodness.
So yeah, the game has changed a lot.
Yeah.
A lot, yeah.
It's interesting, Don, because you talk about you mentioned earlier, besides the nutrition and the physical training and the work ethic and all that, the psychology of it. My high game, and I haven't bowled in years, my high game was an even 200. And I was thrilled with that. But a couple of years ago, we got a Wii, and my wife and I like to do the Wii bowling. And I was pretty good at that. I averaged right around 200 because the ball isn't heavy, and you don't hurt your back or anything like that. And one night she was doing something in the kitchen and I just decided to bowl myself. And after 9 frames, I had 9 strikes. I got 2 strikes in the 10th frame. And then instead of just finishing it, I went in, I said, Tammy, if I get one more strike, I've got a 300 game. She came in and watched and I got like a 6. So I finished with a 296. Even in Wii bowling, the psychology of it, if you're like, all of a sudden you realize I'm this close, that's a critical part of it. And I don't think, people think, well, I'm one of the 70 million people that bowls and it's just a matter of taking the ball and rolling down the lane. Psychology enters into that as well, doesn't it?
It does. It does. Look at other sports. Look at the Tiger effect on the PGA Tour. These guys are phenomenal players, and then all of a sudden it's Sunday and Tiger's playing next to them, and all of a sudden, they'll grip it. Yeah, they grip the club like it's a snake. It's the same thing in bowling. These kids are so good from early on. The psychology is so different. They're not afraid of anything.
Yeah,
they're really not. And why should they be?
Yeah, for sure.
The game at that point is so simple when your psychology is built correctly. They just know they walk from point A to point B, they hit target, their hand goes through the ball, or 2 hands go through the ball, whether one hand, 2 hand, whatever. As long as that ball comes off the hand and the way they want it to, at that point, their influence on the bowling ball is done. They've done everything they can do. And then it's sheer physics after that. And, they're not afraid of anything. And it's amazing to watch how confident they can be in the moment.
I want to talk about your collegiate bowling career. You bowled at UNLV. How good was your team?
We had fun.
You were in Vegas, so yeah.
Yeah, we would. All of us were 21 at that point when I qualified for the team. We would out bowl you on Saturday and then out drink you Saturday night and then out bowl you again Sunday morning and leave everybody thinking, how did that happen? We qualified for sectionals one year. We went to Phoenix. We ran into Wichita State, some of those preeminent programs. And that was pretty much the end of the season. The environment in college bowling then, there were quite a few programs on the West Coast that were quality programs and some really good bowlers on the West Coast. That's not necessarily the case now. There's not a lot of programs on the West Coast that have what I would say, those upper echelon programs. And so it's a little bit hard for the bowlers of today to kind of West Coast to kind of get out there, and most of them have to go to the Midwest or somewhere else. But yeah, we did okay and did fine against the teams out here, and you can only beat the teams you're bowling against, right?
Right.
So sometimes when you got in those larger events like sectionals and such, you got in there and you went, wow.
Yeah.
Again, big fish, little pond kind of scenario again.
Yeah. Now, of course, Vegas at that time, UNLV, I mean, we all call it Vegas, but UNLV at the time was best known for its basketball program. Did you get to know any of those players from that era, the late 80s, early 90s, Stacey Augmon, Larry Johnson, any of those people?
Funny, the championship season, I had Greg Anthony and Larry Johnson in a sociology class. Mm. It was a Thursday class where I believe we met 30 times. And I don't think the two of them were in that class very often.
Yeah.
when they were there, they were, pretty engaged and everything else. But at that time, their schedule, they were in the gym or they were playing somebody somewhere or doing something. And, and then, you'd walk through the cafeteria or the student union and, hey, there's Anderson Hunt, there's George Hackle, the atmosphere around Las Vegas and on campus at that time was pretty special.
Now, I saw an interview or heard an interview, whatever, with Stacey Augmon after his rookie year in the NBA. And he was asked how, for him personally, pro basketball differed from college. And his response was, it was hard to get used to a salary cap.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some of those players that went on to have some very, very successful careers at the next level. And at that time, most of the undergraduates, we parked in the back parking lot of Thomas Mack, and then you wandered your way onto campus. And when you saw a very, very nice brand new car, the first thing you did was look to see if that was a basketball player driving that car. That was just one of those things you just did.
Yeah, but it happens at every school. But certainly the level of throwing it in the NCAA's face was perfected at UNLV among some other schools. What is the attitude in Las Vegas about those teams? Do they say, oh, well, everybody does it? Or, man, we had some great athletes, we had to pay them, and I kind of wish we didn't have to do that. But what do people think of now, goodness, 30 years later? Sorry to make you feel old.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of hard to say, because that's the thing about Las Vegas. You're not going to find a lot of people that have been around for that long. People are kind of in and out. I remember having conversations with my father-in-law, who's since passed away, talking about those Rebel teams. At that time, that was all we had.
Yeah,
we had no professional sports. We had the AAA baseball team at that time who was the Las Vegas Stars. I believe they were the
Padres.
Right? Padres, exactly. Kevin McReynolds and all them, exactly. And so the Rebels were all we had. So everybody comes from somewhere else to Las Vegas, and they bring their teams with them. But then the community doesn't have anything that the community itself can grab a hold of and call it their own. That's why the Vegas Golden Knights are for me, they're not as big as the Raiders, but for me, there's such a greater connection with them, right? And it's the same thing with the Rebels. So the people at that time, that's ours.
Yeah.
That's ours. Leave it alone. Tark's the greatest. Leave him alone. Obviously that history was there with him in the NC2A and at Long Beach or wherever it was and whatever else. But, this is ours. These are our guys. We're all at the game. where it's such a great atmosphere at that time in the Thomas and Mack. When they're playing, that place is rocking and rolling, and they could be playing whoever,
Right.
and it doesn't matter. And that place is rocking. And I'm sure your past guest Jay Bills could talk probably about what it's like to play that juggernaut that was UNLV at that time.
Yeah, for sure. You now cover the sport. Just talk about how you got involved with covering college bowling or covering bowling in general.
That's kind of a weird story. And I'll try to shorten this up. So our hometown little bowling center here in Boulder City, Boulder Bowl, opened in 1947, 8-lane center that I grew up in. I'm coaching there, working with the kids and so on, and working there as a mechanic and leagues and everything else. So our proprietor at that time, brand new proprietors, she had worked for a bowling magazine in California. So she's IBMA member, International Bowling Media Association. So someone she knows from the Bay Area contacts her and says, "Hey, do you know anybody who would be interested in being a voter in the media poll?" And about the same time, I'm trying to write little blurbs in our little secondary paper here in town about bowling and, who did what this week score wise and things of that nature. Maybe a little, coaching tips and just, whatever else. So I'd been doing that for a couple of weeks. I had sent in my membership to IBMA, got my membership about that same time. And she came to me one day at work and said, "Hey, I got this email. You want to check it out? What do you think?" And I saw it. And I thought, yeah, this is great. This is great. Because at that time, our youngest son was just kind of finishing up high school, getting ready for college. We had some pretty talented youth bowlers here in Las Vegas who were having a hard time getting exposed nationally. And so in my head, I put it together that, I can do this. I can see which programs are successful, which ones are growing, which ones are getting better, which ones are getting worse, so on and so forth. And then I can help the local bowling community and the youth, because that's one of those really hard things, parent-kid decisions that you ever make. One of those is remembering you're a student athlete. You're not an athlete student. They don't call you an athlete student.
Right.
And
except at UNLV. But anyway, go on.
Yeah. And a few others. But, and so that was a great way for me to help some of those people and some of those kids and parents to say, okay, this is kind of what I want to study. Well, okay. Well, here, I'm going to tell you, here's maybe 15 programs that are kind of on the way up or near the top. If you think that's important, maybe you should do your homework, see if they have your particular discipline that you want to study. And then we'll kind of go from there and help get you to at least maybe go take a visit.
Yeah.
Visit the coaching staff, see what kind of a program they have. Make sure that if you're in psychology, for instance, that their psychology department is what you want to do. So there's a lot of things in that.
Yeah,
but
that's great.
It's one of those things that really keeps me engaged in what I do too, because there's a lot of different ways that I can be involved in the game, and I enjoy it. So then why not do it?
Yeah. Okay. Now we talked offline, obviously, about collegiate bowling. NCAA sponsors only women's bowling, but there's also an organization that sponsors men's bowling. How many men's and women's teams? How many schools sponsor men's and women's bowling teams?
So NC2A is women's only, and then the governing body of bowling, the United States Bowling Congress, their collegiate division actually does men's and women's. And actually, believe it or not, there are some schools out there that have an NC2A program for women's, and then they'll also have a USBC program for women at the same time. Kind of weird. And then you also have NAIA does stuff. There's a junior college. There's also a club version. So shortcut, obviously the world we're in, COVID has really wiped some programs out temporarily. Pre-COVID, we were I think the group of teams that we vote on in that media poll, I think we were at 186 men's teams.
Wow.
And around 150 women's teams that we voted on. Hopefully we get through COVID and hopefully those numbers go back, because we were growing probably, 10 to 12 men's programs every year and probably 10 women's programs every year. It seemed like there for, 17, 18, 19, 20 kind of a thing. Yeah.
It seems like, it seems like it would be a good sport for a university to pick up, because especially with Title IX, and maybe that's why the NCAA is sponsoring women's teams, but it's a sport that doesn't take a lot of financial commitment. You don't have to build your own alley. You don't have to, the equipment is bowling balls, and shoes and maybe a little bit of wax. I don't know. It's not like fielding a football team or even a basketball team where you have to build an arena or something like that. I would think it would be something that schools would migrate to. Kansas State, where I went to college, where I went to grad school, had developed a rowing team and has become pretty good, because you just got to buy a few boats and some oars, and there's a river and a lake really close to the campus. So plenty of places to practice. Do you think that's why it was growing? And let's put COVID in the past, because I think we're getting close to that. Do you think it's going to be a growing sport for men and women?
I think so. And yeah, you're right on the Title IX side. That certainly appears to be, that would be a reason. If you look at a lot of the programs that are real successful on the NC2A side, they have some big three sports involved. Nebraska just won the NC2A championship a week ago in Kansas City, Missouri. And it has to. You would think that success-wise and the growth-wise going forward for bowling, it has to happen. That's the foundation. That's the launching pad for the men's tour and the ladies tour.
Yeah.
The ladies tour went away for a few years. It's back now. Competitive women bowlers at that point, it was collegiate bowling and then sort of nothing after that. Now they have that. So again, that's going to make, I think, collegiate bowling more popular, more successful. Men's side as well. That bowling itself is sort of shrinking, and there's a lot of things going on there that's making the sport in general sort of shrink. The areas where there's growth is high school and college bowling. And like you said, I know I have sort of firsthand knowledge to some programs, obviously having a bowler just graduate. Budget wise, it doesn't take a lot. And if you're a preeminent program, there's manufacturers out there that are going to help you on the equipment side.
Sure.
It's not like you're going to give somebody a full ride scholarship. NC2A might do that, obviously, but the other schools that you're going to hand them a few dollars here and there, you can probably run a very successful program, probably with a yearly budget of somewhere in the lower six figures.
Yeah.
And you figure out a football program that's going to cost you a couple $1 million probably, no matter what.
Yeah, lower six figures is a weekly budget for a lot of the big football programs, if not even less than that. I want you to champion, now take off your journalist hat and just as a bowling, I don't want to say bowling nerd, but somebody who's been around it since you were a little kid. Just champion the sport of bowling. To me, bowling is like golf in that you can keep competing long after you can with baseball, football, and basketball, long after those players have to retire. Why is bowling such a good sport to take up?
Well, it's a sport that doesn't require a lot of financial investment to get started. Heck, you can walk into a bowling center anywhere, probably rent a pair of shoes, grab a house ball off the rack, and start at it.
Yeah.
There's people far smarter than me in the sport who remember those big league days, 60s, 70s, 80s during the growth of bowling. Bowling was the original. Yeah. Bowling was the original social network. I'm sorry, Facebook. It's not you. You know, if you think about it, right? You know, maybe your dad and my dad worked for the same company, and there's a company bowling league, and every Monday night for 32 weeks in a row, they bowl together.
Yeah.
You know, and then it went to fraternal organizations, and it went to churches, and it went to whatever. And that was a thing that you did. And, you know, the more connected we are to devices, we're looking for connections. You know, there's so many connections that can be built inside the sport. You know, the sport is a super tight knit community. It always will be. The more it shrinks, the tighter it gets. And anybody can compete at any level, especially when you just when you consider it's one of those sports that, you know, hey, I was one pin better than the last time I walked in here, and that's a success for me. Or you go in there just for the social aspect of it, or if you go in for the competitive side of it, there's a lot of different facets to it.
Sure.
So yeah, it's just one of those things that you can bowl forever if you want. You know, it's just fun and entertaining, and you know, as things evolve. The sport and the bowling centers are trying to evolve. You know, you notice a lot of centers are doing short leagues where you're only connected for 12 weeks because they know that people don't want that long-term commitment.
Yeah.
You know, and it's flexible, and it's just, you know, business evolve. The successful business evolves the way its customer base needs it to evolve. And hopefully more of that comes about in the future. And then maybe we stop slowing down and shrinking a little bit, and then we go into, you know, larger growth for the entire sport, not just certain areas.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to ask you a really difficult question, but, you know, hey, we're cousins. We can forgive each other, right? What is the future of bowling?
Well, that's going to be a tough one. I know in a lot of areas, you know, the real estate underneath those lanes is getting to be too valuable to be used just for bowling. There was an article, and I don't remember where I read it. It might have been 10 years ago. It might have been 15 years ago. I don't know. The older we get, the less we remember what actual time frames.
Yeah.
It mentioned in there that Don Carter Lane at one time in the corporate bowling, you know, entity that Don Carter Lanes was, that their most successful bowling center at one time, their ROI was like $150 a square foot over a period of time. Old Navy, if they have a store that makes $150 a square foot, they close it down because it's not profitable. And so, you know, especially in areas like California and places like that,
yeah,
you know, you had people develop bowling centers 60s and 70s. They want to retire their past retirement age. You know, their kids might be attached to that property, and they know that they could sell that property for a heck of a lot more money than that monthly rental that they're getting out of that bowling center. So a lot of bowling centers are going under. So for those that want to bowl, it's getting a little more difficult to find places that are open. So again, we're going to have to evolve. We're going to have to evolve as athletes, as competitors, bowlers, parents, coaches, bowling center proprietors, owners. We're all going to have to evolve and figure out how best we go forward so that people don't, you know, in 30 years say bowling. I don't even know what that is. You know,
right. I'm going with the power vested in me. I'm going to now commission you as the commissioner of bowling. What's the first change you make? Wow. Yeah, I didn't send you this one ahead of time. Sorry.
Yeah, it's hard. You know, you can't tell a landlord, you know, not to make decisions that benefit him and injure the sport. You know, I don't know. things have evolved so far from when bowling was the big daddy. Don Carter was the first athlete with $1 million endorsement as a bowler. And do a lot of people know that?
I didn't.
Yeah, but from that point to now, when bowling was the big thing, right, on ABC Sports on Saturday, right?
Yeah,
it was wide world of sports, and it was the PBA Tour. And now I hear it all the time from family and friends that are older. You meet somebody and you're talking about bowling, and so I remember when you could watch bowling all the time. Is it still on TV? Yeah, it's on this, and things change, and yeah, I don't know. I was inducted in the Southern Nevada Bowling Association Hall of Fame in 2015, and my speech talked about there's potholes in the game. And it seems like there's a lot more holes every day you're on that road, and there's not enough people filling the holes. And it's the farther you drive, you see more holes. And
you run out of asphalt to fill them.
Yeah. And then you watch, and then it seems like there's someone digging holes instead of fixing the holes.
Yeah.
So trust me, there's a lot of discussions with a lot of people at different levels. And I'm sure it's the same with any sport right now.
Yeah.
What does the future look like? And how are we going to make the most of it?
All right. Before we wrap up, I just want to switch to a little bit of a personal note. How did you become a Raiders fan? I mean, that you are the black sheep of our family, as I look at it.
Yeah,
being a Raiders fan, I'm obviously being facetious, but as a Chiefs fan, I like to rub it in. I've got a few friends who are Raiders fan. I like to rub in the fact that we are still the reigning AFL champions, and we always will be. Not only are we the reigning AFC champions, but how did you become a Raiders fan?
Well, when you're young and you're a little on the rebellious side, or you want to push your dad's buttons, right? My dad was a Broncos fan, being born in Denver, Colorado. For many decades, I have told people that my two favorite teams are the Raiders and whoever Denver plays this week. And so it was just one of those things. When I started watching football, late 70s, early 80s, the Raiders were a bit better than they are now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes, very much so.
So it makes it pretty easy to be a Raiders fan at that time. There were certainly a lot of seasons where about week 4, we've already been mathematically eliminated. And I'm not about to tell people I'm a Raiders fan at that point. Now that the Golden Knights are here, you go, okay, when does training camp start at City National? I got to get over and watch the Golden Knights because I know we're not going anywhere.
It's interesting. You told me that you're less of a Raiders fan now that they moved to Las Vegas. For a while they were in Los Angeles and then back to Oakland, and you were a long distance fan. Now you said you work a mile from their stadium and you're not as much of a fan. Is there a chance that we can convert you to the Chiefs Kingdom?
I don't know if I'd go that far, but here's the thing. There was kind of some shenanigans, in my opinion, as far as how some of the state funding got put together to help the organization build the stadium that I affectionately call the giant Roomba, because that's what it looks like. It looks like a big Roomba vacuum sitting right there on I-15. It's a beautiful place, but from the outside, that it just facetiously, hey, look, there's the Roomba, and so. And then I think it goes back to that ownership thing we talked about with the Rebels, right? The Golden Knights is something that was ours. It wasn't like a team from somewhere else got here. I remember we ended up, the Jazz played one season here in Las Vegas before they went to Salt Lake City. That wasn't our team. Yeah, they played here, but what sense of ownership as a fan do you have in that situation? I know the Raiders are going to do some great things. They're doing phenomenal things inside the community and such.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to be a connection here in Las Vegas. There's 2.5 million people here. It's a lot more people than people think.
Yeah.
It's a really small place. Somebody like me who's lived here basically my whole life, I can still reach a lot of people in town with just a few phone calls. It's really a lot smaller. So it's one of those things. And then there's some things that, let's be honest, the typical Raider fan is not exactly the warm and fuzziest people around sometimes, right?
No, but you got to say,
we all have our edge.
when Allegiant Stadium is full and packed to the brim with screaming Raiders fans. Oh, wait a minute. We haven't had that yet because their first season in the new stadium didn't have any fans. So do you think a city will support it? Because what I'm hearing is that the stadium will be full, but it'll be half visiting fans. People saying, "Hey, let's go to Vegas for the weekend. We'll go to a game." I've got a bunch of buddies that we plan trips to go to sporting events. That's my world. I schedule everything around sporting events. And we're talking about coming out to Vegas for the Chiefs Raiders game once that's allowed. Do you think the community will support the Raiders once they're allowed to?
Oh yeah, and to be honest, there's enough people moving from California that are Raiders fans that are only moving here to support the team. So yeah, the support will not be an issue as far as that goes. You've only got to sell 70,000 seats in a town of 2.5 million people. And if 20,000 people travel with the Saints in an interconference, game, then it's only 50,000. And we also know that, a lot of tickets are going to get picked up by the casinos, probably in their host programs and such to take care of their people. And that place will be full. It'll be full. It'll have tons of support. Obviously there's a lot more support in town. If you looked at it, fan to fan versus, the Vegas Golden Knights, for instance, but, you can't underestimate the connection the Golden Knights have with the community, especially with 1 October. And that's not the fault of the Raiders. The Raiders were still in Oakland at that time, but that connection, that's an emotional connection. And we all know sports is all about emotion.
Yeah.
Unless the Raiders, I don't know, unless the Raiders somehow win the Super Bowl or, we host the Super Bowl here in Las Vegas and the Raiders are in it and they win. You know what I'm saying? There's going to have to be something very large, I think, where the non-football fans or whatever, make that jump onto that, and then those, even, right now, for instance, UNLV basketball, they have a hard time drawing. Okay. Back when they were great and winning, it was hard to get a ticket.
Yeah.
The Golden Knights right now, there are people that I promise you, there won't be as many fans, but there's those bonds after 1 October, those bonds will never be broken. And there's going to be people that are going to they're going to be dedicated to that organization to such a high level, no matter what happens with that organization. If the Raiders, there's fans in there and they lose, I don't know.
You're right, Don, that it's an emotional thing. I remember growing up in the 60s here in Kansas City, and my parents, who or knew very well, would say, hate is not a virtue that is allowed in this house. It's not a Christian virtue. You are not allowed to hate, except the Raiders. We were taught it was okay to hate the Raiders. It is an emotional. Yeah. It is an emotional thing, and I think you're right. Is once there's an event that connects with the community emotionally, I think that will certainly be part of it. And with that stadium, I think they're there for the long haul. That Mark Davis is not his dad. He's not going to be looking for the next green pasture 5 years from now, like his dad did. By the way, UNLV, Kevin Kruger, you're going to love that kid. Not a kid, but I'm really good friends with his dad. I've known his dad for years. I met Kevin when he was 7 years old. Solid guy, good coach. You're gonna love him. So,
and Lon did a great job when he was here. I mean, all of us that look to see that Rebel program to get back to sort of what we were doing, that's what we all respond to as well. We were great when Lon Kruger was here, so maybe we get back to those days.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, it's always good to catch up with you. I'll have to look you up if I make that trip to Vegas for the Chiefs Raiders game. Well, maybe we'll get one of those pictures. The lion and the lamb together. The Chief fan. I'm part of a coach's ministry, and our three leaders. One's a Broncos fan, one's a Raiders fan, and me. And I say, we're the start of a bad joke. Chiefs fan, a Broncos fan, and a Raiders fan walk into a ministry meeting.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I think we can still get along even with our different allegiances. So again, great to catch up with you, and appreciate the time. Thanks for the insight on bowling. I learned a lot of stuff today that I didn't know.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm glad that we got to be a part of this.
Thanks for listening to Sports Connections with David Smale. Make sure to subscribe, follow, and rate the show from your favorite podcast platform. You can learn more about David Smale and his work by visiting davidsmalebooks.com. Don't forget to join us weekly for new episodes. Until next time.